It's now time for our upper semis between Abrakeydabra and Method EU. And we're also going to be starting on a personal favorite of yours, Slew. We're going to be going into Waycrest Manor.
Dr. Waycrest Manor. But, I mean, this is the dungeon that we said was the nastiest. But, I mean, with a team as well composed as Abra at least has been, and gunning for that first place and wanting to prove themselves and wanting to show that they can win the cup and so on and so on and so on, you'd expect a good performance from them. But, you know, Method EU almost kind of just kicked back, had some fun with an off-meta comp, but did so well with it that I wouldn't be shocked to see it again.
You think it's going to continue on that one, Nagura?
To be fair, I mean, if you look at their final times from the dungeons, they really weren't as fast. I mean, no girls allowed. They just played really badly. They had lots of wipes. They cost a lot of time in King's Rest as well. So I believe Abra, if they execute their strategies well, they're gonna win. Now, if Abra ends up making mistakes like no girls allowed did, then there's definitely a chance for Method EU to win, even if they run a weird comp.
Well, that's the thing when you're playing against Method EU is that in many cases you have to be playing these strong compositions, and sometimes you also have to be pretty lucky too, because they're not going to be making mistakes.
No, they're not, and Method EU is just such a, well, I mean, it's like Zyra said earlier, they've done this a million times. They can run whatever off meta comp and they'll be fine knowing it, and there it is again. I mean, Blood DK, the Havoc's not, I mean, as I would say off meta right now, it's becoming pretty popular in some groups, but, you know, Mirror's still on the BM Hunter, and it's important to note that they had such a flawless run and quite successful runs. I mean, they beat their last series 2-0. It wasn't like they fluked one game, so, you know, important to note for those at home, you don't need MDI meta comps in order to complete your weekly dungeons, so stop doing it.
And invite disc freaks.
That's a lie.
Thank you for that one, Sloot. I very much appreciate that, and my Rio appreciates that as well. Method EU with that 58%. Everyone's cheering for these meta comps, off meta comps coming into it. I know now is riding that Blood DK train and ready to go for Waycrest.
Gross on the Blood DK train, but they are Night Elves at the end of the day, and Night Elves is the name of the game with the ability to shadow meld Maria's pulls, really kind of mimicking a Shroud environment. They do have a Shroud available. Of course, Gingy is back on that Hunter, so I wonder between Gingy and Mirrors how they decided who plays Hunter and who plays Rogue. Do you think they just kind of rock, paper, scissors for
it? Maybe they just switch it out once in a while. There's probably maybe some bets going on. I don't know. Either way, we do see Abra on a more common comp for Waycrest. I mean, we see the Wisp Reaver instead of the Rest, which is definitely a change, but we've seen it quite a lot happen now in Waycrest Manor, so definitely the favorite for this dungeon specifically. Not completely sure why, but just Mist Reaver in general seems to be more favored for this dungeon. Abra engaging the Triad now. They still have their Bloodlust available. We've seen Pain for Fam hold on to their Bloodlust the last time around and just use it for trash instead, because it is a fortified environment instead of the tyrannical one.
Yeah, so I mean, Method EU is now at, they just slightly changed their logo. I just noticed there's a Europe and a North America under it with a EU flag on there, so that's a nice touch. But Method EU now at 5% trash from the initial pull that they did, matching them as Abrakeydabra with 5%. Some of the trash in the room. Sister Selena just getting past her first phase. Both teams actually completely neck and neck right now. There goes the Death Grip on the side from now to grab some of the trash and bring it in and to cleave it on top of Sister Milady.
Yeah, so we see Method EU using the Bloodlust while Abrakeydabra just holding on to it. It was probably just doing the same thing as Pain for Fam does, really. Now, Method EU is struggling quite a bit here. Sally did proc the staff already with HP because he just dropped so low. So definitely some problems coming in for them. Well, Abrakeydabra looks a lot smoother for them. They also are pulling trash on top and now also committing the Bloodlust. So they are not trying to commit the Bloodlust for a trash pull later, but just pulling the trash on top of the boss. They also have those guards and the acolytes that do a lot of tank damage, so Divine Field definitely wants to watch out for this one. I do believe they actually did the same pull with Necrotic, but that, of course, they were running the stone form, so they were able to get rid of it. Now this time around, Bursting and Explosive, it is decently dangerous, but if you have those rogues to deal with the explosives, you don't really have to think about them too much, and then you only have to deal with the bursting. And if you just commit some of your defensive cooldowns like Cloak and AMS, then you should be fine overall.
Should be fine, but we'll see if they are in the end as they reach the second round of Sister Malady there on the side of Method EU, while Abrakeydabra is already working on Sister Briar, so kind of flexing their more prominent single target. I mean, some cleave, obviously. There was a captain present who was patrolling the hallway earlier, the same one that Method EU pulled. There's a Guardian, Guard, and a Captain pack. There we go. In the hallway that both teams pulled aggressively onto it. So Abrakeydabra done with that, finishing up the Captain, just a bit offset there as they get to 11% and head out in said hallway as Method EU finishing up their pull. The Acolyte is still present in the group. That'll give them their 11% as we see Dr. J run right into the trash on the side, pop his defensive for post, and is just waiting for the rest of the group to likely squeeze by so that they can shadow meld. And out he goes indeed.
Yeah, so they did the skip that we've seen from most groups. Now, one thing I want to note about the comp difference is that Method does not have a DK. They don't have an unholy DK, rather, available to them. So some of those huge pulls that we've seen in the past that happened in Waycrest Manor, where you just rely on your DK to kill everything really quickly, something Method you can't really do with their composition. So want to keep an eye on that, especially later on when we are in Ral's room and in Ral's area. Now, Abra did a little bit of a smaller pull here compared to what we've seen Pain for Femme do earlier, but they also, Pain for Femme did have their bloodlust for this specific pull. So definitely just Abra going a little bit smaller here. Now they're engaging with this Void Emissary in the courtyard, and this is something where we've seen teams wipe through just because either they didn't have enough damage for the Void Emissary to nuke it down before some of those casts go off, or it was just a bunch of Thorn Shapers casting the infected thorns on people and just everyone dropping dropping low. Sorry.
Yeah, so a bit of a nice discipline there from Abrakeydabra. They got 4 stacks of bursting early on in this pack and then waited until it fell off. So no DPS braining, if you will, on this side, and then continued to finish the rest of the trash. But they did play it a bit safer. They grabbed some of those thorn dogs, essentially, back into the hallway, killed those off first, which actually ended up proccing Zmok's staff. So neither healer has their staff available, and then they went out into the hallway. So not the most aggressive pull we've seen today. We saw the entire courtyard done earlier today along with the dogs, but Abrakeydabra, they know their game here. As I said, at 24% trash, we've done the pull to the side of Matron Brindle as they now combine Soulbound Goliath along with what I believe will be the 2 Thorn Shapers and that Emissary of Tide. So it looks like they only wanted the Emissary first. They used a Ring of Peace from Zmok to bump it close to them because it is not, of course, attached to the 2 Thorn Shapers on either side, and they're cleaving it down as Method EU is working on the same pull right before doing the side pull.
Yeah, so Abba's strategy looking very similar to Pain for Femme strat, except they're doing it everything a little bit slower compared to Pain for Femme, actually. So interesting to see those differences in strategies. Well, Method EU, of course, they're behind to Abba. They're doing also the same pulls, just they don't have the same comp, they don't have the same amount of damage, so everything just a little bit slower for Method EU. But you can see right now they also pulled the boss to the side. You see Gingy in the back there with the repulse popped. He's going to Shadow Melt or vanish off the aggro from the mini boss, and then they're going to do the same thing as Abra does. But Sally actually dropping very low.
I think that was actually Mirrors because he has Feigned Death, so he's the one who just pulled it to the side, Feigned Death, and came back in. I think Gingy was in there the whole time DPSing. Unless he Shadow Step back in and Mirrors came off screen, which might have fooled me, but I guess either of them could have done it. Nonetheless, doesn't really matter. They did pull it successfully off to the side, combining it with some trash on top of it. 25% for Abrakeydabra, trash-wise, as they sit at 54% on Soulbound Goliath. Now, they have pulled the 2 guards and the Disciple that rest in the corner of that hallway area near the Triad. We see teams typically do this a lot as long as you make sure to interrupt the not the guards, but the Disciple in there, just because it has a nasty silence effect that can go on the healer or really anyone in the group. Method now 29% trash, so slightly ahead of Abrakeydabra trash-wise, but 20% behind on this boss. But it's only Fortified, Nagura.
Yeah, it's really not a big difference if you look at the boss HP. 20%, not a huge deal on a Fortified setting. You can see a lot of damage coming out of Frag on the Demon Hunter here, doing huge amount of burst damage at the pull. And now something we've seen as well before was teams just pulling more trash on top of Goliath at the very end. Not something we see yet come out of Abrakeydabra, but Zmok also seems to be very struggling with mana. He's completely out of mana, so I'm not completely sure if he wants to use a mana potion as well or just have a channeled mana potion, as he just regained some mana, so I assume he did use something right there. Now, the mana should be fine to finish off the boss, but it definitely can't pull any more trash on top of it, just because bursting, anything like that, will be too much damage for Zmok to handle with the mana pool that he has left here. So I assume they're just going to finish it off and then go further. As Method EU, they're catching up quite a bit in damage. They're not that far behind anymore. It seems that both of those teams are pretty equal.
Yeah, pretty equal on both sides, and I mean, they've kept about the same 20% gap on the boss. I'm just curious to see if, I'm going to be curious rather to see if Method EU is going to pull some of the trash on top of the boss, because Zalia's mana is okay.
Yeah.
I think he still can pot on top of it. We finally see Goliath fall for Abrakeydabra right now. Immediately Fish Feast, 3 of them for some reason, go down as they all start eating right now, making sure to replenish the mana, and we're going to see what I assume to be maybe aggressive. Well, knowing Abrakeydabra, should be a pretty aggressive haul pull, but as you mentioned earlier, Nagura, it's really interesting to see from them. They actually pull 2 Thorn Shapers on top of this. It's really interesting to see from them. You know, they're trying to be the best. They're trying to go the fastest, and their strategy, as you mentioned, similar to Paint for Femme earlier, but Paint for Femme just doing everything faster, so quite impressive to see from the team earlier.
Yeah, definitely. We see Method EU now actually pulled some mobs on top of Goliath here. Sally completely out of mana, so they want to make sure that they use defenses when the bursting stacks come out, because Sally is not going to be able to heal that much with the mana pool that he has left. Now, of course, we do have defensives available. There's a Cloak, there's a Blur from Frag, there's also Turtle and Self-Heal have available for Maris as well, so they should be fine even without the mana from the healer. But Abra, they're further ahead into this hallway now, still doing some smaller maggot pulls, or finishing off the pull, rather the one with the Void Emissary. And now we're going to see what they do. Now this is, I think this hallway and this whole area around Ral is going to be very important, because we've seen some big differences between the teams earlier, where some teams did bigger pulls than others. And this seems like a very big pull in a Fortified setting.
Yeah, this is not just Fortified, but we have Bursting and Explosive in here. Now, Explosive is easier for them because of the 2 Outlaw Rogues, and they can, in an emergency situation, line of sight, but the Bursting's really what's going to get out of hand in combination with all of the bleeds and the Spit debuffs going out. We can see triple Infest debuff on Divine. That's going to spawn into 2 extra Maggots right now. As Ashine gets quite low, Death Pact not enough to save him. He goes down. He was their only battle res, so he's not able to be rezzed up, as we see defensive run and kite here from Divine Field as they try to stabilize the pull, and it looks like they managed to do it, but they have to kill the remaining Maggots here from that Infest. Method EU doing a slightly smaller pull, but a more stable. Was it the same? Okay, so certainly more stable on their side. No deaths on their part, as Swagstep getting quite low. We already had a cheat death proc from Dr. J, so he's vulnerable now for the next 6 minutes, and man, this pull is just never ending for them.
Yeah, this is taking so long, especially because you also have the Emissary of Tides there making mobs and not interruptible, so you just have to Infest go off, and there's lots and lots of more maggots spawning. But yeah, you can see Method EU actually did do a smaller pull. Yeah, you're right, so they did get a less percentage here from this pull. It looked like now was just gripping instead of, while Divine Field was running there, now was gripping the mobs, but it doesn't seem like he got all of them. Maybe some tricks from the Rogue and not coming out from Method EU sides. But now they are moving on to the Ral room, both of them. There's an Emissary that you really want to watch out for with this enchanted one. You want to make sure that no one is... there's also a lot of explosives, but you're able to line of sight them, so lucky on them. Maris actually going down. They do have a battle res available if they want to use it.
Yeah, but using those 30, that 30 runic power to get the battle res up is quite sketchy, if you will, for the DK tank, but manages to get it off. They know they need the damage coming in from Mir, so they prioritize that, as now backs off to safety, just getting ready to line of sight in case any of those explosives went off. He doesn't want to get involved at all. Now, DKs certainly have their strengths. You could see it in raw HPS or healing output, but that's because they take a pretty substantial amount of increased damage over something like a warrior. I mean, that's just how they're built. They're meant to take that extra damage and also build it back up. I believe that was so close.
Yeah.
1% health on now right now as he manages to stabilize, gets another huge death strike, and just backs off of the trash. And you can see just how defensive the DK needs to play versus something like a warrior. A warrior most of the time could just stand in there and keep smacking the damage and pounding. Now had to get in and out of that pack 3 times just to survive, and he still almost nearly fell. So there's a reason why you don't see, at least in speedrunning, too often blood DKs, but they can certainly hold their own under the hands of a guided and good player.
It definitely seemed like that second pull that Method EU was doing there was bigger, because they caught up in percentage up until the point where Abra pulled more mobs on top of Ral here, which we see from Method EU as well. There's a pulling the rest of the mobs that are in this area on top of Ral. Not a huge pull anymore, but because of Fortified and Bursting, you just can't pull too many mobs on top. There's no way of your team surviving all of those Bursting stacks, especially your tank and your healer who just don't have access to any sort of immunity. So you want to make sure that your pulls are a little bit smaller and you deal with the Bursting pretty well. Now, Abra and Method EU both Bloodlust available to them, but not opting to use it here for this rel pull. So they're either going to save it for a bigger pull, a bigger trash pull on top of the next boss, or they just hold it for a Fortified boss like we saw Fem do earlier, which really didn't make much sense. So gonna have to ask them what their plan was there. Maybe they really just forgot about it. Either way, look at the boss percentage. Method EU pulled the boss quite a bit later, but they're not that far behind in boss damage. So it really seems like Method EU does have a little bit more single target damage.
They do, but they're also 8% behind in a, well, now 6%. They just killed one more mob in a Fortified setting, so that is something to account for. And as you were mentioning, you know, the tanks typically, well, if you're running what we've seen the meta be a lot of prot where don't have anything for bursting. However, the advantage of the Blood DK here for now on the side of Method is that he has anti-magic shell available, so you can pre-pop that and it immunes those bursting stacks coming in, so quite useful to keep the tank safe during those very heavy trash pulls, as we've seen earlier. Abrakeydabra dealing with this last single target, single digits of percent for Rawl the Gluttonous here as Method EU. They've kind of widened the gap a bit. As you mentioned, they were about 1 to 2% different, and now it seems that the gap has become about 8 to 9%. Abrakeydabra finishes off Rawl, wasting absolutely no time. Swag runs into the lodge or living room area, if you will, and pulls the remaining 2 survivalist packs, tricksing them to a position where I'm not exactly sure where Divine Field's waiting for them. He might be snapping them or just might be sitting in the corner of the room, so they're going to have to wait for them to manually run in.
Yeah, so they actually did snap the mobs here on top of this ledge. As you can see, they are all grouped up on Divine Field now. This snapping is so important just especially because of explosive as well, because if you have them slowly walk in, then there's going to be explosives on the way over there, and because they're running those full melee lineups, it's going to be really hard for them to deal with those explosives that are really far away. Even with the increased melee range from the Outlaw Rogues, it's just not going to be enough if they're spread out all over the room, and even if you manage to deal with them, it's still just going to cost you damage because everything is spread out. You need to walk away to melee range, deal with explosive, and then come back. So snapping very, very important for these kind of pulls that we see come out of Abra. Now, Method EU doing a very similar pull. You can also see that they're also snapped here on top of the ledge. So yeah, close between those two, but Abra definitely in the lead right now. They only have 1 death. They still have 2 battle rests available. So if anything does go wrong, as long as a Shine doesn't die, then they have the safety net of the battle rests. And they also have the Bloodlust. So we'll see if they want to commit the Bloodlust for the next boss room or if they save it for something later on.
Yeah, perhaps like a Fortified boss at the end of the dungeon. We'll have to see. A lot of bursting going in right now on Method EU as Zayli tries to stabilize the group. Has re-procced his staff already, so definitely not going to have that available for the remainder of the dungeon, whereas Zmox's debuff has worn off for the staff, so he's able to accrue some of those stacks yet again and hopefully use it to some good somewhere at the end of the dungeon. Won't be as powerful as if it were stacking the entire time, but nonetheless, bursting finally is healed off by Zayli here for Method EU that are getting ready to move through the kitchen. I think they don't want to do anything with that Void Emissary. They're just waiting for it to cast its final hit, and they all head downstairs immediately, skipping the second Void Emissary along the way, and they're looking to get to that basement area as quickly as they can, where Abrakeydabra has already combined all of the trash with the boss, and still no Bloodlust.
Yeah, very interesting. I still believe, I think most of those teams just want to save it for the horrors on top of the last boss. And maybe Pain for Fam just decided to not do it very last second because they knew they're ahead and they just didn't want to risk it, but they just saved it if they have to do the pull. But that's really that's a very dangerous pull you have to. We actually see Frag going down here for Method EU side. It seems like they didn't do the skip properly. This might be a huge disaster for them. As Sally is going down, they do have the battle rest come out, thankfully, so Sally can accept the rest and then get the whole group back up. But it's 5 deaths on the board. So 20 seconds difference now between those two teams, and the time that it takes Sally to cast that mass rest and everyone getting rebuffed. So huge time loss there from Method EU.
This never would have happened if they were running 3 rogues, a Resto Druid, and a Prot Warrior. I just want everybody to know. But now, jokes aside, it's certainly just a mistake, had nothing to do with the classes. Missed skip completely, but they, you know, in typical Method EU fashion, they kind of recovered it the best way they could. They waited for Zayli to die as quickly as possible. They might have even taunted a mob when they saw that everything kind of went south, and then immediately now battle resed him. Everybody else died. He took the res. So nice recovery as far as recoveries can really go in that situation for them. They indeed do the same aggressive pull in the entire room as now starts getting trucked. He should be taking enough damage to ramp a lot of healing into that death strike, so you should see his HPS skyrocketing, which is actually 120k right now for Azalea. Now starts catching up at around 80k and rising. 91% trash here for Abrakeydabra as Lord and Lady Waycrest have been united in the second phase of the fight, both at around half HP of the remainder of this last phase, that is, of course. Method at 87% trash and has stabilized with most of the trash there, and pretty much equivalent levels of healing for the tank and the healer.
So now you gotta think about this, right? If Abra is watching the stream, they know about this wipe that just happened from Method EU. They know they have a decent amount that they can use to make up and still win, right? So in theory, they don't have to do this whole horror on boss pull. They have the Bloodlust available, so that's probably the strategy that they want to go for. But if they're this far ahead, maybe they just don't want to play it safe. We see Gingy go down, unfortunately for Method EU. They don't have a Battle Rest available, so they have to do the rest of the fight with only 2 DPS left. And yeah, Abra seems like they're not pulling the horrors on top of the last boss. They are playing it safer. Either way, it seems like a weird thing to do, to hold on to your Bloodlust all the way until his last point. But if it's a really close match and you need to do this insane pull, then you just have this Bloodlust there as a safety net. So if you don't really need it for any of those pulls before, as we can see Abra having only 1 death so far, so they don't need the Bloodlust for any of those other pulls. So maybe just, having the safety net in case it is a very close match, just having this Bloodlust here for the very last boss.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of 3 things, right? They either intended to do the pull, as you mentioned, took it safe and didn't. They either forgot about it, or they're saving it for the next dungeon. Between those 3 options for a team like Abrakeydabra, you would assume that it's probably the first option, but I'm actually not really sure what Gingy even died to on their side. I think it might have been debuff in combination with the arcane swirlies on the ground, something like that. But I mean, to have a rogue flop over there is not what you want to see. And unfortunately, of course, he had consumed his cheat death earlier because of the failed skip. So that is going to be a huge extra time sink for Method EU. And I don't think they're going to be able to squeeze by this one, as Abrakeydabra is now on Gorak Tool, who sits at 65%. They've already dealt with all their trash. And I mean, they're going to take this one, and they still haven't used their Bloodlust.
I think at this point they're just taunting Method EU. They're just like, you know what? We don't even need the blood.
You're very kind today, Nagura, but I really think they just forgot about it because they just popped it now at 55%.
Once all the cooldowns were done.
Well, no, Ashine still has his cooldowns, and I don't think he's using those either yet. Finally.
Now he used the army. Maybe they were waiting for Ashine's army. I didn't really pay attention to Ashine's cooldowns, but army is definitely like one of the biggest single target cooldowns you can have as a DK, and you will see him pop off in single target damage right now. So maybe they were really just timing the Bloodlust with that army. Army is a 10-minute cooldown, same as the Bloodlust debuff, and maybe they were really just waiting it for Rogues. Bloodlust actually doesn't give them as much of a damage increase at all. The haste is not really helping them that much, so maybe they were really just like lining it up with the DK cooldowns.
Entirely possible onto that one. Very, very kind of you, Nagura.
They just forgot about it. They just forgot about it, let's be honest.
It happens. It happens.
Does
to
it,
the best
though?
of us. Yeah, I can't remember the one time that Slew would ever forget Bloodlust. It's way too important for him. But,
I play tanks.
Yeah, you get drums. Drums.
Why can't you have drums?
I'm a healer. You think
That happens when you have 5
drums?
gold, right?
Oh my goodness. Anyway, Abrakeydabra, though, taking the victory on Waycrest Manor, showing why it is the proverbial J-Crest Manor on that one's ironic.
Yeah, I mean, we keep talking about Waycrest Manor. Like, these guys are really good in this dungeon. Abra's always been really impressive in Waycrest Manor. But I think the scary thing to point out here is until the full team wipe that Method EU had, they were like right on the heels of Abrakeydabra, the entire dungeon. They were right there, maybe 20, 30 seconds behind, with this kind of off-meta comp that we keep bringing up because it's so irregular to see from any team in the MDI, and just seeing them be that close to a team that's playing as well as Abrakeydabra is right now, it's just super scary.
It's awesome to see as well.
And I just want to mention, and I kind of really half joked about this earlier, but the truth is, throughout the season, especially after the Outlaw Rogue nerf, we kept saying, hey, look, this meta can be opened up big time, and I don't want to take away from Zyra's gig right now because he's got to talk about what really happened in the match, but the meta can be opened up, and Method EU is kind of half joking here, but the reality is there's a lot of potential in a lot of different comps.
Well, I don't even want to say that it's like a bad comp in general. I just think like the only reason that Abrakeydabra looked better in this dungeon in general is the Unholy DK. I think if like Method swapped out the Hunter for the Unholy DK, even with the Demon Hunter, they probably would have beat Abrakeydabra if they had practice in it and they had practice with the comp, because the Unholy DK is what enabled a lot of these pulls. They use the Unholy DK cleave on Rawl, they used it on Lord and Lady Waycrest, and they even use it on Gorak Tool. You can just see Ashine at the top of the meters in every single one of those pulls. This is another dungeon where Unholy DK can really shine if you manage your trash into bosses properly.
That's where they can really shine under that one. You love to be able to see it. It's okay, Zyrotic. It's all right to laugh.
Why didn't I think of that?
Sorry, I had to be able to pick up, a little alley-oop. I got you.